The 29th of October 1862, Bates County, Missouri. The prairie is on fire. Smoke rolls across Island Mound as 240 black soldiers face a wall of Confederate horsemen. The rebels carry shotguns, pistols, and sabers. They outnumber the Union troops 6-1, and they are charging. These men of the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry were never supposed to be here. The President of the United States refused to let black men serve as soldiers. The Secretary of War said no. Official policy declared that black Americans lacked the courage, the discipline, the ability to fight. But Senator James Lane of Kansas ignored them all. He recruited these men anyway. Former field workers, former blacksmiths, men who had escaped bondage in Missouri and Arkansas, men who carried rifles now instead of hoes. The Confederates see easy prey, runaway workers playing soldier, men who will scatter at the first volley, men who have never faced combat. They are wrong. Captain Henry Seaman watches the rebel cavalry close the distance. His men have their Austrian muskets ready, bayonets fixed. There is nowhere to run, the fire behind them, the enemy in front. The only way out is through. These 240 men are about to do something no black regiment has ever done in this war. They are about to stand their ground against a Confederate charge. They are about to fight hand to hand with men who would rather kill them than take them prisoner. If they break, they die. If they run, they die. If they lose, every politician who said black men could not fight will be proven right. The horsemen are close now, close enough to see their faces. The 1st Kansas does not run. To understand what is happening on this burning prairie, you need to understand what America believed about black soldiers in 1862. They believed it was impossible. Not impractical, impossible. The official position of the United States government was that black men could not serve as combat soldiers. President Abraham Lincoln refused to authorize black regiments. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton rejected every request. The army did not want them. The politicians did not trust them. The reasons given were always the same. Black men lacked courage. They would break under fire. They could not follow orders. They did not possess the discipline required for military service. These were not fringe opinions. These were official government positions repeated in newspapers, debated in Congress, accepted as fact by most white Americans. 18 months into the Civil War, the Union Army remained entirely white. Senator James Lane of Kansas did not care what Washington thought. Lane was a radical, an abolitionist, a man who had led raids into Missouri to liberate people held in bondage. By 1862, thousands of black refugees had fled to Kansas seeking freedom. Lane looked at these men and saw soldiers. In August 1862, he wrote to the Secretary of War requesting permission to raise a black regiment. Stanton delayed his response for weeks. When the answer finally came, it was no. Only the President could authorize such a thing, and the President had made his position clear. Lane recruited them anyway. He called them laborers on the official paperwork. He armed them with Austrian and Prussian muskets. He trained them at Fort Scott. He gave them uniforms, bayonets, and a purpose. By October, the 1st Kansas Colored Volunteer Infantry numbered 500 men ready for combat. The men who filled those ranks had every reason to fight. Many had escaped from Missouri. Some had fled Arkansas. They knew the men they would face. Some had worked the same fields as the guerrillas now hunting them. Some had been beaten by the same hands now holding Confederate pistols. This was not an abstract war for them. This was personal. The Confederate guerrillas operating in Bates County understood this too. They called themselves bushwhackers. They raided farms. They terrorized Union sympathizers. They answered to no regular army. And they had made one thing clear about black soldiers. They would not take prisoners. Capture meant death. Not battlefield death. Something slower. Something meant to send a message. The guerrillas who gathered near Island Mound in late October numbered between 500 and 700 men. They rode horses, they carried shotguns, pistols, and sabers. They knew the terrain. They had been fighting in this country for years. Against them stood 240 infantry soldiers, men who had been training for only 2 months, men who had never seen combat, men whose government still refused to acknowledge them as real soldiers. The arithmetic was brutal. mounted cavalry against infantry on open ground, veterans against recruits, 700 against 240. Every military manual said the same thing. Infantry caught in the open by cavalry would be ridden down, scattered, destroyed. The charge was the most terrifying moment in warfare, and these men had never faced one. The guerrillas saw exactly what they expected to see. Former field workers in blue uniforms, men who would run at the first shot, men who would prove everything white America believed about black soldiers. They spurred their horses forward. The first volley tears into the Confederate line. Men fall from their horses, but the charge does not stop. The guerrillas crash into the Union position. The neat lines dissolve into chaos. Smoke from the prairie fire mixes with gunpowder. Men scream, horses scream. The world becomes a hellscape of flame and violence. The 1st Kansas cannot reload fast enough. The Confederates are too close. Shotgun blasts rip through the Union ranks. Sabers flash in the firelight. The mounted rebels have every advantage: speed, numbers, experience. But the black soldiers do not break. They fight with bayonets. They swing their rifles like clubs. They drag men from horses and kill them on the ground. The training they received at Fort Scott takes over. Thrust, parry, strike. The movements become automatic. A detachment under Captain Ward finds itself cut off from the main force. Rebel horsemen swirl around them. There is no retreat. The men form a tight circle, bayonets pointed outward, and fight for their lives. Private Gardner takes buckshot in the thigh and knee. He falls to the ground, unable to move. A Confederate dismounts and walks toward him. The rebel puts a pistol to Gardner's head and fires. The bullet strikes his skull, glances around it, and exits the other side. Gardner survives. He lies still in the smoke while the battle rages above him. The prairie fire creates a wall of flame behind the Union position. The smoke blinds everyone. Men fight shapes in the haze. They strike at movement. They shoot at sounds. There is no way to know who is winning. Lieutenant Huddleston had set the fire himself, hoping to screen his men from Confederate sharpshooters. Now it traps them. The only escape is through the rebel cavalry. The fighting is close enough to smell. Blood and gunpowder and burning grass. The heat from the fire presses against their backs. The rebels keep coming. A small group tries to reach a ravine for cover. The horsemen cut them off. The black soldiers form a line and fire a volley directly into the charge. Horses collapse. Riders tumble. But more take their place. At Fort Africa, Captain Seaman hears the gunfire intensify. He knows his men are in trouble. He gathers every soldier he can spare and leads them toward Island Mound at a dead run. On the burning hillside, the 1st Kansas is running out of time. Their ammunition is low. Their casualties are mounting. The rebels sense victory. Then the reinforcements arrive. Seaman's men slam into the Confederate flank. Fresh rifles pour fire into the mounted guerrillas. The pressure on the surrounded detachment eases. The Union soldiers push forward. The rebels face a choice: continue the fight against reinforced infantry or withdraw. They have already taken casualties. Their easy victory has become a real battle. They choose to withdraw. The Confederate horsemen pull back over the top of Island Mound. The firing slows. The smoke begins to clear. The 1st Kansas holds the field. 8 men are dead. 11 more are wounded. The ground is littered with bodies, shell casings, and the debris of close combat. But the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry has not broken, has not scattered, has not run. They have done what every expert said was impossible. They have won. John Sixkiller is already dying when he makes his choice. He is Cherokee, a scout attached to the 1st Kansas. He enlisted alongside men he had once held in bondage, fighting now for the same cause. The war makes strange allies. When the Confederate cavalry charges, Sixkiller is caught in the open with the forward detachment. There is no cover, no retreat. Just open prairie, burning grass, and mounted rebels closing fast. The first bullet hits him in the chest. He staggers but does not fall. He raises his rifle and fires. A Confederate tumbles from his horse. A second bullet strikes him, then a third. His body absorbs the impacts. Blood soaks through his uniform. Any other man would drop, would crawl towards safety, would accept that he has done enough. 6 Killer reloads. The horsemen are everywhere now, sabers swinging, pistols cracking. His fellow soldiers fight hand to hand around him. Men fall on both sides. The smoke is so thick he can barely see. A mounted rebel charges directly at him. 6 Killer waits until the horse is close enough to touch. Then he fires. The second Confederate falls. His rifle is empty now. No time to reload. A rebel dismounts and comes at him with a saber. 6 Killer reverses his grip on the musket and drives the bayonet forward. The third Confederate dies on the end of his blade. 6 Killer is still standing, still fighting. His body is failing, but his will is not. Blood runs down his chest. His vision blurs. His hands shake. But he will not stop. Another rebel approaches. This one has seen what 6 Killer has done, has watched him kill 3 men while absorbing wounds that should have killed him twice over. The Confederate raises his pistol. 6 Killer does not have time to aim, does not have time to reload. He swings his rifle like a club with everything he has left. The butt of the musket connects with the rebel's skull. The fourth Confederate falls. Then 6 Killer falls too. He collapses on the burning prairie, surrounded by the men he has killed. His war is over. His life is ending. But he has shown everyone watching what courage looks like. 4 men, shot multiple times, dying on his feet, and he kept fighting until his body simply could not continue. The soldiers around him see what he has done. They see a man who refused to surrender, refused to run, refused to accept death without taking the enemy with him. They see proof that everything white America believes about them is a lie. If 1 man can do this, what can 200 do? What can 2,000 do? What can an army do? 6 Killer's stand lasts only minutes. In the chaos of the battle, few will witness it directly. But the story will spread, will become legend, will prove that black soldiers and their allies will fight to the last breath. He dies on that hillside, dies before the reinforcements arrive, dies before the Confederates retreat, dies without knowing that his side will win. But John 6 Killer does not die like a man who has been defeated. He dies like a man who has made his enemies pay for every inch of ground. 4 rebels killed, multiple wounds absorbed. A last stand that belonged in the pages of history. This is what the War Department said was impossible. This is what happens when men fight for their freedom. The Confederates retreat over the top of Island Mound. The gunfire fades. The smoke drifts across the prairie, and the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry stands victorious on ground they were never supposed to hold. The numbers tell a story that white America did not want to hear. 240 black soldiers against 500 to 700 Confederate guerrillas. Infantry against cavalry. Recruits against veterans. Outnumbered 6-1 in the final clash. 8 Union soldiers dead. 11 wounded. The Confederate losses are unknown, but the guerrillas leave their dead behind as they flee. The next day, when Union reinforcements descend on Hog Island, they find the rebel camp abandoned. The enemy has scattered into the Missouri countryside. The 1st Kansas has won the first combat victory by black soldiers in the Civil War. Not a draw, not a holding action. A victory. The enemy attacked. The enemy was repulsed. The enemy retreated. This was not supposed to happen. Every expert in Washington had said black men would break under fire. Every politician who opposed black enlistment had predicted disaster. Every Confederate who rode toward Island Mound expected to scatter runaway workers playing at soldiering. They were all wrong. The guerrilla captain Bill Truman survives the battle. In the days that follow, he tells supporters in Butler exactly what he witnessed. The black troops fought like tigers. These are not the words of a Union propagandist. These are the words of a Confederate who watched his men driven from the field by soldiers he had expected to slaughter. The news spreads faster than anyone anticipates. Within days, newspapers across the country carry reports from Island Mound. A correspondent from the New York Times who accompanied the regiment files a story. The headline describes the desperate bravery of the black soldiers. Papers in Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago pick up the account. For the first time, Americans read about black men standing their ground against Confederate cavalry. Senator James Lane seizes the moment. He had raised this regiment against the explicit wishes of the War Department. He had gambled his political reputation on men the government said could not fight. Now he has proof. Lane presents the victory at Island Mound as evidence that black soldiers are not only capable but exceptional. He demands that the Lincoln administration acknowledge what has happened. He pushes for official recognition of black regiments throughout the Union Army. The men of the 1st Kansas receive no medals, no formal commendations, no parades. They return to Fort Scott and continue training. But something has changed. The question is no longer whether black men can fight. Island Mound has answered that question with blood and fire and bayonets. The question now is whether America will let them. Richard Hinton, the regimental adjutant, writes his own account of the battle. He describes soldiers who fought with a ferocity that surprised even their officers. The men fought like tigers, each and every one of them, and the main difficulty was to hold them well in hand. They did not need encouragement to advance. They needed restraint to prevent them from charging recklessly into the enemy. This is the testimony of a man who watched the battle unfold, a man who saw former field workers and blacksmiths transform into soldiers before his eyes. The 1st Kansas Colored Infantry has done more than win a skirmish. They have shattered a myth. They have proven that courage has no color. And they have opened a door that can never be closed again. The Emancipation Proclamation takes effect on January 1, 1863. With it comes a change that the men of Island Mound helped make possible. Black soldiers are now officially authorized to serve in the United States Army. 2 weeks later, on January 13, 1863, the 1st Kansas Colored Volunteer Infantry is formally mustered into federal service at Fort Scott. The regiment that fought without government approval now carries the full authority of the United States. The men who were called laborers on paperwork are now recognized as soldiers. But recognition comes with a cost. Captain William Matthews and Lieutenant Patrick Minor, the 2 black officers who helped lead the regiment, are stripped of their commissions. The War Department will accept black soldiers. It will not accept black officers. Matthews and Minor must choose between leaving the regiment or serving as enlisted men under white commanders. They stay. The cause matters more than the rank. The army that rejected these men now needs them desperately. The war is grinding through white regiments at a terrible pace. Casualties mount with every battle. Volunteers grow harder to find. The same politicians who said black men could not fight now calculate how many black regiments they can raise. General James Blunt commands Union forces in the Indian Territory. He has read the reports from Island Mound. He has seen what the 1st Kansas accomplished against Confederate guerrillas. In the summer of 1863, he puts them to the test again. The Battle of Honey Springs on July 17, 1863, becomes the largest engagement in the Indian Territory. The 1st Kansas Colored faces Confederate infantry across an open field. This is not a skirmish against guerrillas. This is a pitched battle against regular troops. The rebels charge. The 1st Kansas holds. When the smoke clears, General Blunt writes his official report. His words carry the weight of a commanding officer who has seen the evidence with his own eyes. I never saw such fighting as was done by the Negro Regiment. The question that Negroes will fight is settled. Besides, they make better soldiers in every respect than any troops I have ever had under my command. Better soldiers. Not adequate, not acceptable. Better. This is not the grudging acknowledgement of a man forced to admit he was wrong. This is enthusiastic praise from a general who has commanded white troops throughout the war. Blunt has watched the 1st Kansas repulse a Confederate charge and maintain perfect discipline under fire. He has seen what these men can do. The recognition spreads beyond the battlefield. Frederick Douglass uses the victories of black regiments to recruit soldiers throughout the North. He points to Island Mound. He points to Honey Springs. He tells black men that they can strike a blow against the system that held them in bondage. By taking up arms, they prove their equality in the most undeniable way possible. The numbers tell the story of a nation transformed. Before Island Mound, no black regiment had seen combat. By the end of the war, 186,000 black men serve in the Union Army. They fight in every theater. They die in every campaign. They help win the war that ends bondage forever. The men who fought on that burning prairie in October 1862 did more than win a battle. They opened the door. They proved what was possible. They gave a nation permission to see what it had refused to acknowledge. Black soldiers could fight. Black soldiers would fight. And black soldiers did fight, with a courage that shamed everyone who doubted them. The 1st Kansas Colored Infantry does not stop fighting after Island Mound. They march through the Indian Territory. They fight at Cabin Creek in July 1863, becoming the first black regiment to serve alongside white soldiers in combat. 2 weeks later, they hold the line at Honey Springs. They prove themselves again and again, in battle after battle, across years of brutal warfare. But war extracts its price. On April 18, 1864, the regiment faces its darkest hour at Poison Spring, Arkansas. Confederate forces ambush a Union supply train. The 1st Kansas fights desperately, but the rebels overwhelm them. When the battle ends, something terrible happens. Confederate soldiers walk among the wounded black troops and execute them. They kill men who have surrendered. They murder men too injured to resist. Of the casualties at Poison Spring, 117 dead and 65 wounded come from the 1st Kansas alone. Nearly half the regiment is lost in a single afternoon. The survivors do not forget. At the Battle of Jenkins Ferry 3 weeks later, black soldiers from the 2nd Kansas Colored charge a Confederate artillery position screaming 3 words: "Remember Poison Spring." They overrun the guns. They show no mercy to men trying to surrender. The war in the Trans-Mississippi has become something savage. Quarter is neither asked nor given. The 1st Kansas Colored Infantry suffers more casualties than any other Kansas regiment in the entire Civil War. They pay a higher price than any unit from their state. They earn that distinction not because they were reckless, but because they were always sent where the fighting was fiercest. On December 13, 1864, the regiment is redesignated as the 79th United States Colored Troops. The men who started as state militia soldiers without federal recognition now carry the official designation of the United States Army. They serve until the war ends. They muster out at Fort Leavenworth in October 1865. The war is over. Bondage is abolished. The men of the 1st Kansas have helped win both. Yet, history forgets them. The 54th Massachusetts charges Fort Wagner in July 1863 and becomes immortal. Their story is taught in schools. Their sacrifice is honored in monuments. A major motion picture tells their tale to millions. The 1st Kansas fights 9 months earlier, wins the first black combat victory of the war, proves what no one believed possible, and almost no one remembers. Until recently. In 2008, the citizens of Bates County, Missouri, dedicate a bronze statue of a 1st Kansas soldier on the courthouse square. In 2012, Missouri establishes the Battle of Island Mound State Historic Site on 40 acres of the Toothman Farm where Fort Africa once stood. In 2015, a documentary about the regiment wins 2 Emmy Awards. The forgotten soldiers are being remembered at last. They deserve to be remembered, not just for what they did, but for what they made possible. 186,000 black men served in the Union Army during the Civil War. Every single one of them walked through a door that the 1st Kansas opened. 240 men on a burning prairie in Missouri. Outnumbered, outgunned, given no chance by the experts, and they won anyway. They proved that courage is not a matter of skin color. That determination cannot be measured by the circumstances of birth. That men fighting for their freedom will stand against any odds. The 1st Kansas Colored Infantry fired the first shots. They won the first victory. They changed history. And now finally, history remembers them. History.